Every species in the galaxy had a number. A clean, simple, measurable number that told the Galactic Union exactly how much suffering a body could endure before it broke. The Velkari scored a respectable 42 on the Universal Pain Index. The Dren, with their hardened exoskeletons and triple-layered nerve shielding, topped the charts at 67. Even the Gorvathi, a warrior race known for biting through steel cables during mating season, landed at a terrifying 71. And then the humans showed up. And nobody, not the scientists, not the diplomats, not the military commanders who had seen entire star systems burn, nobody was ready for what happened next. Because the number that came back from the human test did not make sense. It did not fit on the chart. And the human, sitting in the testing chair, had not even flinched. He had yawned. This is the story of how one species rewrote the rules of the galaxy. Not with weapons, not with ships. Not with technology stolen or borrowed or invented in some clever laboratory. They did it with something far older, far stranger, and far more terrifying. They did it with pain. The research station orbited a dead moon on the edge of Union space. It had no name, only a number. Outpost 7714. It was the kind of place where things were studied that nobody wanted studied too close to home. Dangerous biology. Unstable chemistry. And sometimes new species. Dr. Vren Salka stood at the observation window of testing chamber 12 and adjusted the magnification on her ocular implant. She was Velkari, tall, thin, with skin the color of wet ash and 4 slender arms that moved like river grass in a current. Her specialty was xenobiology, the study of alien life, and in her 40 years of practice she had catalogued over 300 species for the Galactic Union. She had tested their reflexes, their healing rates, their metabolic thresholds, and yes, their pain tolerance. It was standard. It was science. Every new species that petitioned for union membership had to go through the same battery of tests. Physical, psychological, neurological. The union needed to know what a species could handle before it allowed them into the fold. Could they survive standard atmospheric conditions on union stations? Could they tolerate the gravity fluctuations of interstellar travel? Could they endure the medical procedures required for intergalactic disease prevention? And most importantly, could they handle pain? Because the galaxy was not a gentle place. Asteroid impacts, radiation storms, hull breaches, combat. The Union had learned long ago that species with low pain tolerance did not survive long in the wider galaxy. They broke. They panicked. They became liabilities. So the test existed, the Universal Pain Index, a carefully calibrated series of stimuli, thermal, electrical, chemical, and pressure-based, designed to measure exactly how much a living body could endure before its nervous system began to shut down. The scale ran from 0 to 100. 0 meant the organism felt everything at maximum intensity, with no natural dampening. 100 meant total neural immunity. No species had ever scored above 75. Vren had tested hundreds of beings in this chamber. She had seen Dren warriors weep. She had seen Gorvathi soldiers scream and beg for the test to stop at level 40. She had seen a Kith diplomat, a species known for their stoic nature, lose consciousness at level 38. She had seen things that made her question whether the test itself was cruel, whether the Union had any right to measure suffering like a commodity. But she had never seen anything like what she was about to see today. The human was already sitting in the testing chair when she entered the observation room. He was alone in the chamber, separated from her by a wall of reinforced glass and 3 inches of sensor-laced composite material. The chair itself was a marvel of engineering. A reclining seat fitted with hundreds of micro-emitters that could deliver precise amounts of thermal, electrical, chemical, and mechanical stimulation to any part of the body. It was not designed to injure. It was designed to measure. But the difference, Vren had always thought, was academic. She studied the human through the glass. He was an unremarkable specimen by galactic standards. Average height for his species, about 6 feet. Muscular, but not excessively so. Skin a warm brown, hair cut short and dark, eyes that moved around the room with a lazy curiosity that Vren found unsettling. He was wearing the standard testing garment, a thin white suit that left his arms and lower legs bare for the emitters to make contact. He did not look nervous. He did not look scared. He looked, if Vren was being honest, slightly bored. His name, according to the file on her datapad, was Sergeant First Class Marcus Cole. formerly of something called the United States Army, currently serving as the human delegation's military liaison to the Galactic Union. He had been selected for the pain tolerance test because he was, according to his own people, a pretty average guy. That phrase had confused Fran when she first read it. She had asked the human ambassador what it meant, and the ambassador, a smiling woman named Diane Chen, had laughed and said, "It means he's nothing special, just a regular soldier. If you want to know what humans can handle, Marcus is your baseline." A baseline. Wren reminded herself of that word as she activated the testing sequence. A baseline. Not their best. Not their strongest. Not their most elite. Just average. Just regular. She pressed the intercom. "Sergeant Cole, can you hear me?" The human looked up at the observation window and nodded. "Loud and clear, Doc. I am going to explain the testing procedure. The chair you are sitting in will deliver a series of controlled stimuli to your body. The stimuli will increase in intensity over time. You will experience sensations of heat, cold, pressure, electrical impulse, and chemical irritation. At no point will the test cause permanent damage to your body. However, it may become uncomfortable. If at any time you wish to stop the test, simply say the word stop, and the sequence will end immediately. Do you understand?" "Got it," Marcus said. He shifted in the chair, trying to get comfortable. "So, this is like a stress test? Like when they put you on a treadmill and crank it up?" Wren paused. She did not know what a treadmill was. "It is a measurement of your neurological response to pain stimuli. The results will help us understand your species' physical capabilities." He cracked his knuckles. A sound that made Wren's assistant, a young Valkyrie named Pell, flinch visibly. "All right, let's do this. I skipped lunch for this." Wren exchanged a glance with Pell. The young assistant's forearms were trembling slightly. Pell had only been on the station for 6 months, and this was his first time assisting with a pain tolerance test on a completely new species. Bren did not blame him for being nervous. The unknown was always frightening. She turned back to the console and initiated the first stage. Stage 1 was thermal. The emitters in the chair began to generate heat along Marcus's forearms and calves. The temperature climbed steadily. 35 degrees, 40, 45, 50. Most species began to show discomfort around 42 degrees. The Valkyrie threshold was 45. Vren watched the biometric readouts on her screen. Heart rate, respiration, galvanic skin response, neural activity. She waited for the spike. At 50 degrees, Marcus's reading showed a slight increase in skin conductance. He shifted his arms. "Getting warm," he said casually. Vren frowned. She increased the temperature. 55. 60. 65. At 60 degrees, the Dren would be invisible to stress. The Gorvathi would be grinding their teeth. Marcus Cole was looking at the ceiling. "That's about like a hot shower," he said. "Maybe a little warmer." Vren blinked all 4 of her eyes. She increased to 70. Then 75. At 75 degrees, the emitters were producing heat that would cause first-degree burns on most galactic species within seconds. Marcus's skin was red. His biometrics showed elevated heart rate and increased neural activity, but his face showed nothing. No grimace, no tension, no fear. "Okay, now it's getting a bit toasty," he said. He sounded like he was commenting on the weather. Pell leaned over to Vren and whispered, "Doctor, his pain markers are elevated, but his stress response is not matching. His body is registering the pain, but his behavioral output suggests he is managing it voluntarily." "I can see that," Vren said quietly. She moved to stage 2. Electrical. Small pulses of current began to travel through the emitters, stimulating the nerve endings in Marcus's extremities. The intensity climbed. 5 milliamps, 10, 15, 20. At 20 milliamps, the average Valkyrie would be screaming. The current was enough to cause involuntary muscle contractions in most species. Marcus's fingers twitched. His jaw tightened for a moment. Then he relaxed. "Feels like pins and needles," he said. "Like when your foot falls asleep and it's waking back up. You guys ever get that?" Bren did not answer. She was staring at the numbers. The readings did not make sense. His body was clearly experiencing significant pain. The neural scans showed his pain receptors firing at rates she had never seen in a conscious, functioning organism. But his cortisol levels, while elevated, were not in the danger zone. His heart rate was high but controlled. His breathing was steady. It was as if his brain was receiving the pain signals and then simply choosing to set them aside. She increased the electrical stimulus to 30 milliamps, then 40. At 40, Marcus's body jerked involuntarily, and for the first time he made a sound, a short, sharp hiss through his teeth. But then he laughed. He actually laughed. "Okay, that one got me," he said. "It felt like I licked a battery, a really big battery." Bren turned to Pell. "Note the time in the reading. Stage 2, 40 milliamps, burst vocalization, but classify it as non-distress. He is not in crisis." "He should be," Pell whispered. His eyes were wide. "Doctor, at 40 milliamps, the Gorvathy test subject last month lost motor control and had to be sedated." She moved to stage 3. Pressure. The emitters shifted configuration, and small mechanical actuators in the chair began to apply focused pressure to Marcus's fingertips, forearms, and shins. The pressure increased gradually, 10 pounds per square inch, 20, 30, 40. At 40 psi, the actuators were pressing hard enough to leave deep bruises on most species. Marcus looked down at his hand where the pressure was being applied to his index finger and frowned. "That's a good squeeze," he said. "Reminds me of my ex-wife's handshake." He grinned at the observation window. "Don't tell her I said that." Bren increased to 50, 60, 70. At 70 psi, the pressure was approaching the threshold for bone stress in most medium-density skeletal structures. Marcus's face finally showed something. A tightness around the eyes, a clenching of the jaw. Pain. Real, genuine pain. But he did not cry out. He did not ask to stop. He closed his eyes, took a long, slow breath, and when he opened them again, the tightness was gone. Breathing through it, he said, more to himself than to anyone else. "Just breathe through it." Pell was gripping the edge of the console with all 4 hands. "Doctor," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "What is he doing? How is he doing that?" Vren did not answer. She was already thinking ahead, already calculating, already trying to understand what she was seeing. The human's body was not more resilient than other species, not significantly. His bones were dense but not extraordinary. His skin was relatively thin. His nerve density was actually higher than the galactic average, which meant he should have been feeling more pain, not less. But something in his neurology, something in the way his brain processed the signals, was different, fundamentally, profoundly different. She initiated stage 4. Chemical. A fine mist of capsaicin analog, a compound designed to activate pain receptors without causing tissue damage, was released into the testing area around Marcus's exposed skin. The compound was calibrated to produce a sensation equivalent to moderate chemical burns. It was the stage that broke most species. The Dren, the Gorvathy, even the legendary Kith. They all broke at stage 4. The mist settled on Marcus's arms and legs. He blinked, looked down at his skin, wrinkled his nose. "Oh," he said. "Oh, that's spicy." Vren leaned forward. "Describe the sensation." "It's like, you know when you cut a hot pepper and then you touch your face? It's like that, but everywhere." He rubbed his arm, smearing the compound across his skin. His biometrics spiked, pain receptors firing at maximum capacity. Neural pathways lit up like a star chart, but his voice remained calm. Strained, yes. Tight, yes. But calm. "We actually have a thing back home," Marcus continued, his voice slightly rough now. "A challenge. People eat the hottest peppers they can find, just to see if they can handle it. For fun." Pal made a sound that Vren had never heard a Velkari make before. Something between a gasp and a whimper. "For fun?" he repeated. "They expose themselves to chemical pain stimuli for entertainment?"
"Yeah,"
Marcus said. He was sweating now, his skin glistening under the chamber lights. "There's a whole show about it. Guy eats hot wings and interviews celebrities. It's pretty popular." Vren sat back in her chair. Her 4 hands were perfectly still, resting on the console. She was looking at the numbers, but she was not really seeing them. She was thinking. She was thinking about what kind of world, what kind of evolutionary pressure could produce a species that treated pain as entertainment, that had developed cultural rituals around the deliberate experience of suffering, that could sit in a chair designed to measure the breaking point of living organisms and talk about television shows. The test was at level 62 on the Universal Pain Index. No species had ever remained conscious and conversational at level 62. The Dren record was 51. The Gorvathy record was 58. And that individual had been a decorated war hero with cybernetic nerve dampeners. Marcus Cole was a baseline. An average human, nothing special, just a regular soldier. And the test was not even close to being over. Vren reached for the controls to initiate Stage 5, and for the first time in her 40-year career, her hands were shaking. She looked at Pell. The young assistant was pale. "Pell," she said quietly, "begin recording everything. Full documentation. Every reading. Every observation. Every word he says." "Why?" Pell asked. Vren looked through the glass at the human, who was now humming something, a melody she did not recognize, something slow and rhythmic, while his body endured pain that would have rendered any other known species unconscious. "Because," she said, "no one in the Union is going to believe us." And Marcus Cole started whistling. Stage 5 was the compound stage. It was the part of the universal pain index that combined everything: heat, electricity, pressure, and chemical irritation, delivered simultaneously in overlapping waves. It was the stage that existed not because the Union expected anyone to pass it, but because the scientists who designed the test believed in thoroughness. In 40 years of galactic testing, only 11 individuals from any species had ever remained conscious through Stage 5. All 11 had been augmented: cybernetic implants, neural dampeners, genetic modifications designed specifically to blunt the pain response. None of them had been natural. None of them had been baseline. Marcus Cole was natural. Marcus Cole was baseline. And Marcus Cole was whistling a song that Vren would later learn was called "Sittin' on the Dock of the Bay" by someone named Otis Redding. The compound stimuli hit him all at once. Heat on his arms, electrical pulses through his legs, pressure on his fingertips, chemical irritation across his exposed skin. His body reacted immediately, muscles tensing, sweat pouring, heart rate jumping to 140 beats per minute. The neural scan showed a cascade of pain signals flooding his brainstem, racing through his thalamus, screaming into his cortex. By every measurable standard, Marcus Cole was experiencing agony. He stopped whistling. His jaw clenched. His eyes squeezed shut. His hands gripped the armrests of the testing chair so hard that Vren could see the tendons standing out in his forearms like cables. For one long, terrible moment, the observation room was silent except for the hum of the machines and the ragged sound of the humans breathing. He looked directly at the observation window, and he smiled. "Okay," he said, his voice tight but steady. "Now we're getting somewhere." It clattered on the floor, and neither he nor Vren moved to pick it up. They were both staring at the biometric display. The numbers were impossible. The human's pain index reading was at 74. 74. 3 points below the theoretical maximum ever recorded, and that record had been set by a Gorvathy cyborg, with 60% of his nervous system replaced by synthetic relays. "Doctor," Pell said. His voice was barely a whisper. "The scale. He is approaching the limit of the scale." "I know," Vren said. "What do we do if he exceeds it?" Vren did not answer. She did not have an answer. The Universal Pain Index had been in use for over 200 years. It had been calibrated against 3,000 species. It had a ceiling of 100, but that ceiling was theoretical, a mathematical endpoint that no biological organism was ever expected to reach. It would mean complete neural saturation with zeroed behavioral collapse. It would mean a body that could feel everything and still function. It was supposed to be impossible. She increased the compound stimuli by 5%, then 10, then 15. Marcus's body was shaking now. Not trembling, shaking. Full body tremors that ran through him in waves. His breathing had changed from steady to rhythmic, a pattern that Vren's instruments identified as deliberate controlled respiration. He was managing his breathing, counting. In through the nose, hold, out through the mouth. She had seen soldiers do this on the battlefield, Gorvathy warriors, Dren commandos, but always with the aid of training implants and chemical regulators. Marcus was doing it with nothing but his own mind. "Sergeant Cole," Vren said through the intercom, "your readings are extremely elevated. I want to remind you that you can stop the test at any time by saying—" "I know the word," Marcus said through gritted teeth. "I'm good. You are experiencing pain at levels that exceed the recorded tolerance of every species in the Galactic Union. Is that supposed to make me quit? Vren blinked. It was intended as information. Well, here's some information for you, Doc. Marcus adjusted his grip on the armrests and settled deeper into the chair. I once stepped on a Lego in the dark at 3 in the morning. This is nothing. Pell leaned close to Vren. What is a Lego? I do not know, Vren said. Make a note. Research later. She watched the readings climb. 76, 78, 80. At 80, Marcus Cole had surpassed every biological pain tolerance record in the history of the Galactic Union. His body was a symphony of suffering, every nerve firing, every pain pathway active, every receptor screaming at maximum capacity. And he was still talking. You know what the worst part is, Marcus said, his voice strained but conversational. The worst part is that this chair is uncomfortable. Not the pain stuff, the actual chair. The back support is terrible. My lower back is killing me. Vren stared at him. She turned to Pell. He is complaining about the ergonomics of the chair. I heard, Pell said faintly, while experiencing the highest pain index reading ever recorded. I heard that too. Her scientific mind was racing, pulling apart the data, trying to construct a framework that could explain what she was seeing. The human's pain receptors were not dulled or damaged. They were, in fact, exceptionally sensitive. More sensitive than the galactic average. His nerve conduction speed was fast. His brain was receiving every single pain signal with perfect clarity. He felt all of it. But there was something else happening. Something in the prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain that the humans used for decision-making, planning, and what they called willpower. The activity in that region was extraordinary. It was as if Marcus's conscious mind had erected a wall between the pain signals and his behavioral responses. The pain was there. He acknowledged it. He felt it completely. But he had decided, on a conscious, deliberate level, that it would not control him. It was not numbness. It was not suppression. It was dominance. He was dominating his own pain. Vren had never seen anything like it. In her entire career, across hundreds of species, she had never encountered a nervous system that could do what this human's was doing. Pain, in every other species, was a master. It dictated behavior. It forced compliance. It was the body's ultimate authority, the signal that could not be ignored. But in this human, pain was not the master. Pain was a servant, an advisor, a sensation that could be heard, considered, and then overruled. I need to stop the test, Vren said quietly, more to herself than to Pell. Why? Pell asked. He is not asked to stop. Because the test was not designed for this. The equipment is calibrated to a maximum of 100 on the index. If I continue to increase the stimuli, I risk pushing beyond the instrument's measurement capacity. I will not be able to guarantee his safety. But he seems fine. Vren looked at Pell with all four of her eyes. He is not fine. His body is under extraordinary stress. His heart rate is 160. His cortisol levels are through the roof. His muscles are in a state of sustained contraction that, in any other species, would have caused them to tear. He is very far from fine, but he looks fine. Vren turned back to the glass. Marcus had closed his eyes again. His face was tight, his jaw set, but there was something about his expression that she could not identify. It took her a long moment to recognize it. It was focus. The same expression she had seen on Velkari monks during deep meditation. The same look Dren engineers wore when solving complex equations. Total, absolute, consuming focus. He was not enduring the pain. He was engaging with it, wrestling with it, treating it like an opponent in some private, internal contest. And he was winning. Sergeant Cole, Vren said through the intercom, I am going to conclude the test. Marcus opened his eyes. Already? The test has been running for 47 minutes. You have exceeded the maximum recorded tolerance of every species in the Union. Yeah, Marcus looked genuinely surprised. 47 minutes? That's it? That's it, Vren confirmed. Marcus sat up as the emitters powered down. He rolled his shoulders, cracked his neck, and stretched his arms over his head like a man getting out of bed after a long nap. His skin was red and blotchy, marked with the traces of heat and chemical exposure, but he moved easily, no limping, no favoring one side. He swung his legs off the chair and stood up. So how'd I do? he asked. Vren looked at the final number on her screen. She read it 3 times to make sure she was not making a mistake. Then she read it a 4th time, because the 3rd time had not convinced her. You scored 83 on the Universal Pain Index, she said. Is that good? Pell made a sound that might have been a laugh if it had not been so full of terror. The previous record was 71, Vren said, set by a Gorvathi warrior with cybernetic augmentation. Marcus nodded slowly. So I beat the record by 12 points. Without cybernetics. Without anything. Marcus was quiet for a moment. Then he scratched the back of his head and said, Huh. Cool. So is there a cafeteria around here? I really did skip lunch. Vren turned off the intercom. She sat back in her chair and stared at the ceiling. Pell stood beside her, silent, his forearms hanging limp at his sides. The data was saved. The recordings were complete. The numbers were real, and neither of them knew what to do with them. Doctor, Pell said after a long silence, what do we do now? Now, Vren said, we send the report to Union Central Command. They will not believe it. No, they will not. What then? Vren closed her eyes. She thought about the human in the testing chamber, the one who had just shattered every pain tolerance record in galactic history and then asked about lunch. She thought about what the human ambassador had said, that Marcus Cole was average, a baseline, nothing special. If this was their average, what were their best? Then, Vren said slowly, they will want to see it for themselves. The report reached Union Central Command on the planet Verithi Prime within 6 standard hours. It passed through the usual channels, automated sorting, preliminary review, department routing. It should have taken days to reach anyone of importance. It took 40 minutes. The reason was simple. The automated system that processed incoming research data was programmed to flag anomalies. A pain tolerance score of 83 from a non-augmented biological organism was not an anomaly. It was a category error. The system did not know how to classify it, so it flagged it for immediate review, and the flag went straight to the desk of Director Cale Morath, head of the Union Species Assessment Division. Cale Morath was Dren, heavy-set, armored in natural chitin plates with small dark eyes that missed nothing. He had been Director of Species Assessment for 22 years. In that time, he had overseen the evaluation of over 100 new species for Union membership. He had seen strange things, impossible things, species that could breathe vacuum, species that communicated through magnetic fields, species that reproduced by splitting into exact copies of themselves. He was not easily surprised. He read Vren's report. Then he read it again. Then he called his deputy into his office. Thessa, he said, have you seen the report from Outpost 7714? Thessa Vaughn was Velkari, like Vren, tall, grey-skinned, with the calm demeanor that her species was known for. She was also the most thorough analyst in the department. The human pain tolerance data? Yes, I reviewed it an hour ago. And it is either the most significant xenobiological finding in Union history, or it is a fabrication. His chitin plates clicked softly as he moved. Dr. Solka has been with the Union for 40 years. She has never submitted a fraudulent report. No, Thessa agreed. She has not. So we take the data at face value. If we take it at face value, then we have a species that can consciously override the strongest pain signals their nervous system can produce. A species whose baseline individuals exceed the tolerance thresholds of our most augmented warriors. Thessa paused. Director, do you understand what that means militarily? He understood perfectly. A soldier who could not be broken by pain was a soldier who could not be broken at all. You could shoot them, burn them, shock them, poison them, and they would keep fighting. Not because they could not feel it, but because they could feel it and choose to continue anyway. It was the difference between a machine and a monster. A machine did not feel. A monster felt everything and did not care. The humans have applied for full Union membership, Cale said. Their application has been under review for 3 years. This data will accelerate that process considerably. Thessa looked at him. Or it will delay it. Some members of the Council will see this as a threat, not an asset. Cale nodded. She was right. The Galactic Union was, at its core, a balance of power. Every species had its strengths and weaknesses, and those strengths and weaknesses kept the peace. The Dren were strong but slow. The Velkari were intelligent but physically fragile. The Gorvathi were fierce but short-lived. Everyone had a role. Everyone had a limitation. The humans, it seemed, did not have the limitations that anyone expected, and that would terrify some people very much. Schedule a meeting with the council, Kale said. Priority level 1. When? Tomorrow. Thessa raised an eyebrow. That fast? Kale looked at the report on his screen. 83. Non-augmented. Baseline. That fast, he confirmed. The Council of the Galactic Union met in the Grand Chamber on Varathi Prime, a vast circular hall with tiered seating for representatives of the Union's 47 member species. The ceiling was a dome of transparent crystal that showed the stars above, a constant reminder of what the Union represented: unity, cooperation, the shared project of civilization among the stars. But today, the stars felt less like a promise and more like a warning. Director Cal Morath stood at the central podium and presented his findings. He was thorough. He showed the raw data, the biometric recordings, the video footage of Marcus Cole sitting in the testing chair and complaining about the back support while his pain index climbed past 80. He showed the comparisons, charts that placed the human score against every other species in the Union. He showed the neural scans that revealed the extraordinary activity in the human prefrontal cortex, the mechanism by which they could consciously override their pain response. He was clinical. He was precise. He was careful. And the council erupted. Representative Goruk of the Gorvathi was the first to speak. He was enormous even by his species standards. 8 feet tall, covered in scarred green hide, with tusks that curved up past his cheekbones. He had been a war commander before entering politics, and he still spoke like one. "This is an error," he said. His voice boomed through the chamber. The equipment must have malfunctioned. No soft-skinned species with a lifespan of barely 80 years scores 83 on the pain index. It is impossible. The equipment was calibrated before and after the test. Kale replied calmly. Dr. Solka ran full diagnostics. There was no malfunction. Then the human cheated. They have chemical agents, drugs that block pain. Everyone knows this. The test subject was screened for all known analgesic compounds before, during, and after the test. His blood chemistry was clean. He was not under the influence of any pain-blocking substance. Goruk slammed his fist on his desk. The sound echoed through the chamber like a gunshot. Then explain it. That, Kale said, is precisely what I am asking the Council's permission to do. He outlined his proposal. A full xenobiological study of the human species. Not just pain tolerance, but everything. Healing rates, endurance capacity, stress response, adaptation under extreme conditions. The Union needed to understand what the humans were, biologically and neurologically, before it could make an informed decision about their membership application. The proposal passed, but barely. The vote was 26 to 21, with the Gorvathi, several of the warrior species, and a handful of the more cautious member states voting against. Their objection was simple and honest. They were afraid, not of what the study might find, but of what it might confirm. That the humans were something the galaxy had never seen before. And somewhere on Outpost 7714, Marcus Cole was eating a sandwich in the cafeteria and telling anyone who would listen about the time he accidentally glued his hand to a table with industrial adhesive and had to rip it free, taking a layer of skin with it. Didn't even go to the hospital, he said, chewing thoughtfully. Just wrapped it up and went back to work. The Velkari cafeteria worker stared at him, all forearms frozen in mid-motion. Humans, Marcus said with a shrug, we're built different. He took another bite of his sandwich and did not notice the way every alien in the room was looking at him. He did not notice the silence. He did not notice the fear. He was thinking about whether the cafeteria had dessert. The full xenobiological study began 12 days after the council vote. The Union assembled a team of 43 researchers from 9 different species: biologists, neurologists, psychologists, military analysts, and 2 historians who specialized in the evolutionary development of predatory species. They were given access to Outpost 7.7.14's full research facilities and a budget that made Pell's eyes go wide when he saw the number. Dr. Vren Salka was appointed lead researcher. She had not asked for the position. She had, in fact, argued against it, telling Director Cale Morath that the study needed someone more experienced in military xenobiology, someone who understood the implications of what they were measuring. Kale had looked at her and said, "You are the one who saw it first. You are the one who understood what it meant before anyone else. The study is yours," so Bren accepted. And the first thing she did was request more human test subjects. The human delegation was cooperative. Ambassador Diane Chen seemed to find the whole thing amusing. When Vren explained that the Union needed to test a broader sample of the human population to determine whether Marcus Cole's results were representative, Chen had laughed. That same easy, confident laugh, and said, "Sure, how many do you need?" Chen gave her 50. They arrived on Outpost 7714 over the course of a week, transported from Earth and various human colony ships in small groups. Vren studied their files as they arrived. She had asked for diversity, different ages, different genders, different backgrounds, different levels of physical training. She wanted soldiers and civilians, athletes and office workers, the young and the old. If she was going to understand human pain tolerance, she needed the full picture. The volunteers ranged from a 19-year-old college student named Emily Zhao, who had never been in a fight in her life, to a 67-year-old retired firefighter named James Okonko, who walked with a limp from an old injury and carried a cane he didn't really need but kept because he said it made him look distinguished. There were marathon runners and couch potatoes, teachers and construction workers, a chef, a dentist, a poet, and a woman who introduced herself as just a mum, and then casually mentioned she had given birth to 4 children without pain medication. Vren tested them all. One by one, they sat in the chair in testing chamber 12, and one by one the results came back. Emily Zhao, the 19-year-old student with no combat training and a self-described low pain tolerance, scored 62-1 on the Universal Pain Index. 61. Higher than the unaugmented record of any species in the Union. She had cried during Stage 4, actual tears running down her face, and she had kept going. When Vren asked her why she didn't stop, Emily wiped her eyes and said, "I told my mum I was doing this, and she said if I quit early she'd be disappointed." That's worse than anything your machine can do. James Okonko, the retired firefighter, scored 79. He had sat through the entire compound stage with his eyes closed and his hands folded in his lap like a man waiting for a bus. When Vren asked him how he managed the pain, he said, "Sweetheart, I ran into burning buildings for 30 years. Your little chair doesn't even have smoke." The chef scored 58. The dentist scored 63. The poet, a thin, quiet man named David who seemed like a stiff breeze would knock him over, scored 69 and spent the entire test muttering lines of something he called free verse under his breath, apparently composing a poem about the experience while it was happening. And the mother who had given birth 4 times without medication, she scored 87. When Vren read the number, she put down her datapad, walked to the break room, and sat in silence for 20 minutes. Pell found her there, staring at nothing. "The mother?" he asked. 87, Vren said. Pell sat down across from her. "That is 4 points higher than the soldier." "Yes, she is not a soldier. She has no training. She is a civilian who raises children." "Yes." Pell was quiet for a moment. "How?" Vren thought about it. She thought about what she had read in the human files, the background information the ambassador's office had provided about human biology and evolution. She thought about a world where the dominant species had evolved not as the strongest, not as the fastest, not as the most armored, but as the most persistent. A world where the primary survival strategy was not to avoid pain, but to endure it. To keep going when everything in the body screamed, "Stop." To run for hours in the heat, chasing prey that was faster and stronger until the prey collapsed from exhaustion. To survive injuries that would kill other predators and come back. To heal and adapt and remember and try again. Their entire evolutionary history is a story of endurance, Vren said slowly. Every other predator on their planet was stronger, faster, or better armed. The humans survived because they could suffer and continue. Pain was not a stop signal for them. It was information. Status report. They feel it, they note it, and they decide what to do about it. But the mother, Pal said, she has no military training, no conditioning, no reason to have developed this ability. Bren looked at him. She gave birth 4 times. Do you understand what human childbirth involves? Pell shook his head. The human infant's skull is almost too large for the birth canal. The process takes hours, sometimes days. The pain is described in human medical literature as among the most intense experiences the human body can produce. And this woman did it 4 times, by choice. Pell sat very still. By choice, he repeated. They choose to experience extreme pain for the purpose of creating new life. Their bodies are designed for it. Their minds are designed for it. The ability to endure pain is not a side effect of their biology. It is the foundation of it. The data continued to pour in over the next several days. The average human pain tolerance across all 50 test subjects was 64 on the Universal Pain Index. The lowest score was 52, from a 23-year-old man with a documented genetic condition that made him more sensitive to pain than the average human. Even he had beaten the unaugmented record of every other species in the Union. Friend compiled the data into a preliminary report. She included the individual scores, the neurological analyses, the evolutionary context, and her own observations. She sent it to Director Cale Morath with a note that said simply, "The soldier was not an outlier. They are all like this." Cale read the report in his office on Varathi Prime. He read it twice, then he called Tessa Vaughn. The mother scored 87, he said. Tessa was quiet for a long time. "Director, I need to ask you something, and I need you to answer honestly. Go ahead. Are we making a mistake? Studying them like this? Cataloging their capabilities for the Union database? It is standard procedure. Standard procedure was designed for species with standard capabilities, but humans are not standard. Every piece of data we collect, their pain tolerance, their endurance, their healing rates, their psychological resilience, every piece of data becomes a strategic assessment to understand an ally or to evaluate a threat. The warrior species on the Council, the Gorvathi, the Thethi, the Crow, they will see this data and they will not think ally. They will think threat and they will start preparing accordingly. What would you have me do? Cale asked. Suppress the data? No. I would have you control it. Release the summary findings but not the raw numbers. Give the Council enough to make informed decisions without giving the warrior species enough to plan a preemptive strike. Cale considered this. It was politically wise. It was also, he knew, probably necessary. The galaxy had been at peace for over a century, but that peace was built on balance, on the knowledge that no single species could dominate the others, on the understanding that every strength had a corresponding weakness. The humans had strengths without corresponding weaknesses, at least not the kinds of weaknesses the Union was used to seeing, and that imbalance was dangerous, not because the humans were dangerous, but because fear was dangerous, and the humans were generating a lot of fear. Agreed, Cale said. Controlled, release, summary only. But Thessa, the data stays intact. If the Council needs it, it will be available. Understood. The summary report was released to the Council 3 days later. It was carefully worded, clinically precise, and deliberately understated. It described the human pain tolerance as significantly above the galactic average, without specifying exact numbers. It noted the neurological mechanism, the prefrontal cortex override, as a unique evolutionary adaptation, without explaining what it meant in practical terms. It concluded that the human species posed no immediate threat to Union stability and recommended continued study. It was, Vren thought when she read it, a masterpiece of bureaucratic understatement. The kind of report that said everything without saying anything at all. But it was not enough to stop the questions. Representative Gorok of the Gorvathi was the first to demand more information. He filed a formal request for the raw data within hours of the summary's release. When the request was denied, he went to the Council floor and made a speech that lasted 40 minutes. The core of his argument was simple. The Union had a right to know the full capabilities of any species applying for membership. Secrets were the enemy of trust, and without trust, the Union was nothing. It was a good argument. It was also, Vren suspected, motivated entirely by fear. Gorok was not interested in trust. He was interested in knowing exactly how dangerous the humans were so that his species could figure out how to fight them, if it ever came to that. But the argument resonated. Several other Council members joined Gorok's demand. The debate went on for 2 days. Vren watched it from her office on Outpost 7714. the proceedings streaming on her console, and felt a growing unease that she could not quite name. It was Pell who named it for her. "They are afraid," he said, watching the debate over her shoulder. "The warrior species are afraid because the humans are stronger than they expected, and the non-warrior species are afraid because the warrior species are afraid. Fear is compounding." "Yes," Vren said, "and the humans have no idea." That was the strangest part of all. The 50 human volunteers on the station had no idea that their test results were causing a political crisis at the highest levels of galactic government. They went about their days with the cheerful obliviousness that Vren was beginning to recognize as a fundamental human trait. They ate in the cafeteria and complained about the food. They explored the station and asked endless questions about everything they saw. They made friends with the Velkari staff, learned 3 words of Dren, and somehow taught the station's Gorvathi security guards how to play a card game called poker. Marcus Cole had become something of a local celebrity, not because of his test results, those were classified, but because of his personality. He was friendly, loud, relentlessly curious, and apparently incapable of passing another being in a corridor without stopping to say hello. He had nicknames for everyone. He called Pell Slim. He called the cafeteria worker Chef. He called the Gorvathi guard at the main entrance Big Guy, and the guard, a 7-foot soldier named Throck who had once killed an enemy combatant with a headbutt, actually seemed to like it. "He is strange," Throck told Vren one evening when she passed through the main entrance. "He shows no fear. I am twice his size, I could kill him with one blow, and he treats me like a friend. Either he is very brave or very stupid." "Perhaps both," Vren said. Throck grunted, the Gorvathi equivalent of a laugh. "I showed him my combat scars, the one on my chest from the Battle of Krev. He showed me his. He has a mark on his shoulder where a piece of metal, shrapnel he called it, went through his body and came out the other side. How did he survive that?" Vren asked. "He said his friend tied a cloth around it and he walked 3 miles to a medical station." Throck paused. "He walked with a hole through his body. 3 miles. Vren said nothing. "Doctor," Throck said, and his voice was quieter now, almost uncertain. "What are these creatures?" It was the question everyone was asking. "What are the humans?" The data said one thing. The experience of meeting them said another. On paper, they were terrifying, a species that could endure pain beyond all known limits, that healed from wounds that would kill other species, that had evolved on a death world so hostile that merely surviving childhood was an achievement. On paper, they were the most dangerous species the galaxy had ever encountered. In person, they were playing poker with the guards and arguing about whether the cafeteria's attempt at Earth food tasted more like cardboard or sadness. The contradiction was maddening, and it was about to get much worse, because the Council had voted. The raw data would be released. Every number, every score, every neural scan, every word Marcus Cole had said while his pain index climbed past 80. All of it. Kale called Vren to tell her personally. "I fought it," he said. "But Gorak had the votes. The data goes public tomorrow." "What will happen?" Vren asked. "Honestly, I don't know. But I think you should tell the humans. They deserve to hear it from us before they hear it from the news feeds." Vren agreed. She ended the call and sat alone in her office for a long time, trying to figure out how to explain to a species of cheerful, sandwich-eating, poker-playing pain survivors that half the galaxy was now terrified of them. She decided to start with Marcus. She found him in the recreation room, teaching a group of Velkari researchers how to arm wrestle. He was letting them win. "Sergeant Cole," she said, "may I speak with you privately?" Marcus looked up, read something in her expression, and immediately stood. "Sure, Doc, lead the way." They walked to her office in silence. Marcus sat down across from her desk and waited. He did not ask what was wrong. He did not fill the silence with chatter. He simply sat and waited, his eyes calm and steady, and Vren realized that this ability to read a situation and adapt was another thing that made humans dangerous. They were not just physically resilient. They were perceptive, alert. They could sense tension the way a predator could sense prey. "Sergeant Cole," Vren began, "your pain tolerance test results, along with the results of all 50 human volunteers, are going to be released to the full Galactic Council tomorrow." "Okay. And I'm guessing the results were pretty high?" "They were the highest ever recorded for any species in the Union, by a significant margin." Marcus was quiet for a moment. How significant. The average human score was 64. The previous record for an unaugmented species was 58. Your personal score of 83 exceeded the record for augmented species, which was 71. Marcus let out a long breath. And the council is freaking out? Several member species are concerned. Yes. Concerned, meaning scared. Then she nodded. Yes. Scared. Marcus leaned back in his chair and rubbed his face with both hands. When he dropped them, his expression was something Vren had not seen on him before. Not pain, not amusement, not boredom. It was sadness. We're not monsters, Doc, he said quietly. We're just people. We hurt, we bleed, we get scared. We just don't let it stop us. I know, Vren said, and she meant it. 12 days of studying humans had taught her more about the species than any amount of data could convey. They were warm, messy, contradictory creatures who could endure agony and then cry at a piece of music, who could survive mortal wounds and then be brought to their knees by the death of a pet. Who could face down the worst the universe had to offer and then turn around and be kind? The council will see the numbers, Vren said. They will see what your bodies can do. But they will not understand what your minds are like, what your hearts are like. Numbers do not tell that story. Marcus looked at her. So tell it for us. What? You're the scientist. You've been watching us for almost 2 weeks. You've seen us at our best and our worst. You've seen Marcus Cole cry at a movie. Yeah, I know you saw that. I'm not ashamed. And you've seen Emily Zhao hold her roommate's hand when she was homesick. You've seen James Okonkwo spend 3 hours teaching your kitchen staff how to make something called jollof rice. You know us, not our numbers. Us. He leaned forward. So when the council reads the report and gets scared, tell them what you know. Tell them what we are. Not what we can endure, what we are. Vren looked at him for a long time. Then she nodded once. Firmly, with a decisiveness that surprised even her. I will, she said. Marcus smiled. It was a tired smile, a human smile, full of warmth and worry and hope all tangled together. Thanks, Doc. He stood up, stretched, and paused at the door. Hey, Vren. Yes, for what it's worth, you'd make a pretty good human. He left. Vren sat alone in her office, surrounded by data and numbers and charts. And for the first time in her career, she began to write not as a scientist, but as a witness. She had 24 hours, and she had a story to tell. Vren wrote through the night. She did not write a scientific report. She had written enough of those, and she knew that the council would not be persuaded by data. Data was what had frightened them in the first place. Numbers on a screen, cold and context-free, stripped of everything that made them meaningful. The number 83 told the council that Marcus Cole could endure unimaginable pain. It did not tell them that Marcus Cole also kept a photograph of his daughter taped to the inside of his locker, or that he laughed at his own jokes even when no one else did, or that he had spent an hour helping a lost Valkyrie maintenance worker fix a broken air filtration unit, because the worker reminded him of his father. So Vren wrote something different. She wrote an addendum to the official report, a document that she titled, after much deliberation, On the Nature of Human Resilience, Observations Beyond the Data. It was not a paper, it was a testimony. A personal account from a scientist who had spent 12 days living alongside the most terrifying species the galaxy had ever measured, and who had come away not with fear, but with something closer to awe. She wrote about Emily Zhao, the 19-year-old who had cried through stage 4 and kept going because she did not want to disappoint her mother. She wrote about the moment after the test when Emily had sat in the recovery room wiping her tears and said to Vren, "I'm sorry I cried. I know it probably messed up your data." And Vren had said, "On the contrary, your tears were among the most valuable data we collected, because they showed that humans were not numb. They were not desensitized. They felt everything, pain and love and fear and determination, all at once, all the time, and they kept going anyway." The tears were not weakness. They were proof of feeling in the presence of endurance. And that combination was something no other species in the galaxy possessed. She wrote about James Okonkwo, who had spent his retirement teaching children how to swim at a community center back on Earth, who had run into burning buildings not because he could not feel the heat, but because there were people inside those buildings who needed help. When Vren had asked him what motivated him to endure pain, he had looked at her with gentle eyes and said, "Doctor, pain is just pain. It comes and it goes. But knowing you could have helped someone and you didn't, that stays with you forever. And that hurts worse than any fire." She wrote about David the poet, who had turned the pain test into art, who had walked out of the testing chamber with fresh written lines about the architecture of suffering and the cathedral of nerve endings, and had immediately gone to the cafeteria to share them with a group of bewildered Dren engineers who had no concept of poetry, but who listened politely because the human's enthusiasm was so genuine that it felt rude to walk away. She wrote about the mother, Sarah Nichols, 41 years old, mother of 4, part-time librarian, the being who had scored 87 on the Universal Pain Index without any training, augmentation, or preparation. Sarah, who had explained to Vren in the simplest possible terms why she could endure what she endured. "You want to know why I can handle pain?" Sarah had said, sitting in the recovery room with a cup of something warm in her hands. "Because I've had practice. Not just childbirth, though that's the big one. I mean everything. Migraines that last 3 days. A kidney stone that felt like someone was stabbing me from the inside. A broken wrist from falling off a ladder while painting my daughter's bedroom. Stitches with no anesthetic because the emergency room was full and I didn't want to wait. Humans get hurt. We get hurt a lot. And every time we get hurt, we learn a little more about how to keep going." She had paused, looking into her cup. "You know what I think it is? I think it's love. Every time I was in pain, real, awful, can't think straight pain, I had a reason to push through it. My kids needed me. My family needed me. Even the kidney stone. I was in the emergency room, doubled over, and I was still on the phone telling my husband where the kids' lunches were packed, because pain doesn't erase everything else. It doesn't make you forget who you are or what matters. It's just one more thing you have to deal with." Vren had recorded every word, and now she wrote them into her addendum, not as data, but as testimony. The words of a librarian from a small town on Earth who could outperform every augmented warrior in the galaxy because she loved her children. The addendum ran to 37 pages. Vren finished it at dawn, sent it to director Cale Morath, and collapsed into her chair. She slept for 2 hours. When she woke, there was a message from Cale on her screen. "Received. Reading now. This is either going to save the humans' membership application or get us both fired. Probably both." The council session was scheduled for midday. Vren watched the proceedings from her office, just as she had before, but this time she was not merely an observer. She was a participant. Cale had forwarded her addendum to every member of the council with a note requesting that they read it before the session began. Whether they had actually read it was another question. The session opened with the formal release of the raw data. Every number, every score, every neural scan, projected on the massive display screen in the grand chamber for all 47 species representatives to see. The effect was immediate and visceral. The chamber, which had been buzzing with the usual pre-session chatter, went dead silent as the numbers appeared. Human average pain tolerance, 64. Human maximum recorded pain tolerance, non-augmented, 87. Previous galactic maximum, non-augmented, 58. Previous galactic maximum, augmented, 71. The silence lasted for 12 seconds. Vren counted. Then the chamber exploded. Gorik was on his feet immediately, his massive frame towering over the podium. "You see?" he roared. "You all see? This is what we are dealing with. A species that cannot be stopped by pain. A species that treats suffering as a minor inconvenience. If these creatures ever turn hostile, how do we fight them? How do we contain them? How do we even slow them down?" Several representatives were shouting in agreement. The Thethi ambassador, a sleek, serpentine being with venom glands and a reputation for cold-blooded pragmatism, rose and spoke in a voice like silk sliding over stone. The Gorvathi representative raises a valid concern. Our entire military doctrine is built on the assumption that pain is an effective deterrent. If pain does not deter the humans, then our weapons are psychological blanks. We can hurt them, but we cannot stop them. This is not a minor concern. This is a fundamental shift in the balance of power. More voices joined in. The Crow representative, a heavily muscled biped with crystalline bones, argued that the humans should be denied membership entirely. The Selvi, An amphibian species known for their diplomatic skill called for a moratorium on the membership process until the security implications could be fully assessed. Even some of the traditionally peaceful species, the Velkari, the Dren, the Hathari, were expressing concern, though their language was more measured. The fear was spreading. Vren could see it, feel it, even through the screen. It was the kind of fear that builds on itself, that feeds on uncertainty and grows in the spaces between facts. Every representative in that chamber was looking at the numbers on the screen and imagining the worst. Imagining human soldiers that could not be stopped, human armies that could not be broken, human enemies that would keep coming, keep fighting, keep enduring, long after any other species would have surrendered. They were imagining monsters. And then Kael Morath stepped to the podium. He was calm, steady. His chitin plates reflected the light from the overhead crystal dome, making him look like a statue carved from dark stone. He waited for the shouting to subside. He did not rush. He did not raise his voice. He simply stood and waited until the chamber was quiet enough for him to be heard. "Representatives," he said, "I've heard your concerns. I share some of them. Data is extraordinary, and extraordinary data demands extraordinary caution. But I would ask you, before we make any decisions based on fear, to consider something that the data does not show." He touched a control on the podium, and the display screen changed. The numbers disappeared, replaced by a video feed. It was footage from Outpost 7714, captured by the station's security cameras over the past 12 days. Not footage of the pain tests, footage of everything else. The first clip showed Marcus Cole sitting in the cafeteria with Throck, the Gorvathi guard. They were playing cards. Marcus was explaining the rules of poker with exaggerated hand gestures and a wide grin, and Throck was watching with the focused intensity of a student learning advanced mathematics. When Marcus dealt the first hand, Throck picked up his cards, looked at them, and looked at Marcus. "I do not understand," Throck said. "These markings mean nothing to me." Marcus laughed, not at Throck, but with the pure, unself-conscious joy of someone sharing something they loved, and said, "Don't worry, big guy. Nobody understands poker at first. That's what makes it fun." He then spent 20 minutes teaching Throck the difference between a pair and a straight. And when Throck finally won a hand, Marcus cheered so loudly that 3 researchers came running from the adjacent lab to see what was happening. The second clip showed Emily Zhao in the station's greenhouse, a small room where the Velkari grew medicinal plants under artificial sunlight. Emily was kneeling beside a row of seedlings, carefully transplanting them into new soil with the guidance of a Velkari botanist. She was asking questions about every plant, what it was called, what it was used for, how it grew. The botanist, initially reserved, had gradually warmed to her curiosity and was now showing Emily how to identify soil health by the color of the roots. Emily held up a seedling with deep purple roots and said, "This is the most beautiful thing I've ever seen." The botanist looked at her with an expression that Vren recognized as surprise. Surprise that an alien would find beauty in something so ordinary. The third clip showed James Okonkwo in the station's kitchen. He had somehow obtained a collection of ingredients from the human supply ship and was teaching the Velkari kitchen staff how to make what he called jollof rice. The kitchen was chaotic, steam rising, pots clattering. Okonkwo's booming laugh echoing off the walls as he tasted the rice and declared, "It not bad for a first attempt, but my mother would disown me." The kitchen staff, 4 Velkari who had been cooking the same standardized meals for years, were watching him with something that Vren could only describe as wonder. Not because the food was extraordinary, but because the joy Okonkwo took in making it was extraordinary. He cooked the way David wrote poetry, with his whole being, holding nothing back. The fourth clip showed Sarah Nichols, the mother, the librarian, the 87, sitting in a corner of the recreation room with a small crowd of alien researchers around her. She had a handheld device and was showing them photographs of her children. She was explaining each picture with the tender pride that parents everywhere, on every world, would recognize. "This is my oldest, Marcus. Yes, same name as the sergeant. Funny coincidence. He's 12. He wants to be an astronaut." "This is Layla. She's 9. She's the smart one. This is Thomas. He's 6. He's the troublemaker. And this is the baby, Anna. She's 3. She doesn't know what any of this means. She just knows Mummy went on a trip and will be home soon." One of the researchers, a Dren mathematician who had spent his entire career dealing in abstractions and equations, looked at the photograph of baby Anna and said, "She is very small." "She is," Sarah said, "but she's tough." "All my kids are tough." "Like you?" Sarah smiled. "Tougher. Kids are always tougher than their parents. That's the whole point." The video clips ended. The display screen went dark. The chamber was silent again, but it was a different kind of silence. Not the silence of shock, the silence of thought. Cale let it sit for a moment. Then he spoke. "These are the beings you are afraid of," he said. "A soldier who teaches card games to security guards, a student who finds beauty in plant roots, a retired firefighter who cooks with joy, a mother who carries photographs of her children across the stars." He paused. "Yes, they can endure pain beyond anything we have ever measured. Yes, their bodies are capable of things that our scientists are still struggling to explain. But that is not what makes them remarkable. What makes them remarkable is what they choose to do with that endurance." He turned slowly, addressing the entire chamber. "They do not use their resilience for conquest. They use it for connection. They endure pain so they can keep working, keep building, keep loving, keep reaching out to others. The same biology that allows a human to survive a wound that would kill a Gorvathi warrior also allows a human mother to hold her crying child for hours without rest. The same neurology that lets a human soldier fight through agony also lets a human poet turn suffering into something beautiful." Cale stepped back from the podium. "I have read Dr. Sulker's addendum. I urge every representative to do the same. The numbers tell you what humans can survive. Dr. Sulker's words tell you why they survive it. And I believe that the why is far more important than the what." The chamber was quiet for a long time. Representatives looked at each other, at their data pads, at the dark display screen where the videos had played. Vren, watching from thousands of light years away, held her breath. It was the Thethi ambassador who spoke first, the serpentine diplomat who had minutes earlier argued that the humans were a strategic threat, uncoiled slightly from her seat and said, in her quiet, venomous voice, "The Dren director makes a compelling case. I would like to hear from the human delegation directly." "As would I," said the Selvi representative. "And I," said the Hathori elder, a being so old that her crystalline body had begun to turn translucent with age. Goruk was silent. He sat in his massive chair, his scarred green face unreadable, his tusks gleaming in the starlight from the crystal dome. He did not speak. He did not object. He sat and he watched, and for the first time in the proceedings, he did not look angry. He looked uncertain, and uncertainty Vren knew was the first step toward understanding. The council voted to hear from the human delegation at the next session. It was a procedural vote, simple, administrative, requiring a bare majority. It passed 43-4. Even Goruk voted in favor. When the session ended, Vren received a message from KL. It contained 2 words, "Well done." She forwarded it to Marcus Cole with a note of her own. "Your people will speak to the council. I hope they are ready." Marcus wrote back immediately. "Doc, we were born ready. That's kind of our whole thing. And despite everything, despite the fear, the politics, the crushing weight of galactic history pressing down on this one small moment," Bren smiled, because she was beginning to understand that the human capacity for endurance was not limited to pain. They endured everything. Fear, uncertainty, loneliness, the vast emptiness of space, the terrifying strangeness of being small and fragile in a galaxy full of things that could crush them. They endured it all. And they did it with jokes and card games and jollof rice and photographs of their children. They were impossible. They were absurd. They were the most stubborn, sentimental, contradictory creatures the universe had ever produced. And Vren Salkar, who had spent her life studying the biology of alien species, was beginning to suspect that she might love them. She did not put that in the report. Some data was too important to write down. Ambassador Diane Shen arrived on Varathi Prime 3 days before the council session. She came alone, which surprised everyone. Standard diplomatic protocol for species addressing the full council called for a delegation of at least 10 advisors, security staff, cultural attachés, translators. Chen brought nobody. She walked off the transport shuttle with a single bag over her shoulder, her dark hair pinned back, her expression the same one Vren had seen in the video calls. calm, alert, and carrying the faintest suggestion of a smile that never quite reached her eyes. Kale met her at the landing platform. He towered over her. His natural chitin armor weighed more than her entire body. His species could crush stone with their bare hands. Diane Chen shook his hand, looked up at him, and said, "Director Morith,
Thank you for the invitation. Your planet is beautiful.
is there somewhere I can get coffee?" Kale, who did not know what coffee was, arranged for a supply to be brought from the human trade vessel in orbit. When it arrived, Chen brewed it in the guest quarters herself using a device she pulled from her bag, a small metal contraption that she handled with the care and precision of a surgeon. The aroma filled the corridor outside her room, and two Dren guards who had been stationed at her door were so confused by the smell that they called for a hazardous materials assessment. Chen drank her coffee, reviewed her notes, and slept for 9 hours. When she woke, she asked for a tour of the city. Kale assigned Tessa Vaughan to accompany her. Tessa was not pleased. She considered the assignment beneath her station and said so directly. Kale told her equally directly that the human ambassador was about to address the most powerful governing body in the galaxy, and that understanding her, really understanding her, might be the most important task Tessa ever performed. So Tessa walked the streets of Verithi Prime with Diane Chen, showing her the great architectural spires of the Dren capital, the underground markets where 100 species traded goods from 1,000 worlds, the memorial gardens where the dead of the last war were honored in stone and light. Chen asked questions about everything, not the polite surface questions of a diplomat making conversation. Real questions, deep questions, questions about the philosophy behind Dren architecture, the economic structure of the markets, the names of the dead in the memorial garden. At the garden, Chen stopped in front of a stone pillar that bore the names of Dren soldiers who had died in the Battle of Varathi. There were thousands of names carved small and tight into the stone, stretching from the ground to above Chen's head. She stood before it for a long time, reading the names, her fingers hovering over the carvings but not quite touching. "We have walls like this," she said quietly. "Back on Earth. Walls covered in names. Places where you go to remember the people who didn't come home." Tessa watched her carefully. "It is a painful place."
Yes, Chen said.
"That's why it's important." That evening over dinner in the guest quarters, Tessa asked Chen the question that had been building in her mind all day. "Ambassador, are you not nervous about tomorrow?" "The council is divided. Several species have expressed open hostility toward your membership application. The pain tolerance data has made many representatives fearful." Chen set down her utensils. She had been eating a Dren grain dish that she had politely described as interesting, and considered the question. "Of course I'm nervous," she said. "I'm representing 8 billion people. The weight of that is something I feel every day. But nervousness and fear are different things." "How so?" "Nervousness is about performance. It's about wanting to do well. Fear is about survival. It's about believing you might not make it." Chen picked up her cup. "More coffee, always more coffee," and took a slow sip. "I'm nervous about my speech." "I'm not afraid of your counsel. That is, either very brave or very foolish." Chen smiled, that same almost smile that never fully formed. "One of my favorite writers once said that courage is not the absence of fear. It's the decision that something else is more important than fear. And what is more important to you than fear? Getting this right." "For my people. For your people. For everyone." Then she said, "The Gorvathi representative believes your species is a threat. I know. He may speak against you tomorrow. I expect he will. How will you respond?" Chen looked at Tessa with eyes that were gentle but absolutely steady. "I'll tell him the truth. That's all I can do. If the truth isn't enough, then we're not ready for this. And if the galaxy isn't ready for us, then we'll wait. We're good at waiting. We've been doing it for a very long time." The grand chamber was full. Every seat occupied, every species represented. The crystal dome above showed a sky full of stars, and the light that filtered through cast moving patterns on the floor, constellations shifting in real time as Verithi Prime rotated through its day. It was beautiful and immense and humbling, and Diane Chen walked to the central podium without hesitation. She was the smallest being in the room. The podium had been designed for species that ranged from 6 to 10 feet tall, and she had to adjust the microphone downward. The act of reaching up and pulling the microphone to her level, this tiny, unaugmented human stretching on her toes to make herself heard in a room full of giants, was so disarmingly ordinary that several representatives found themselves leaning forward in their seats. Distinguished representatives of the Galactic Union, Chen began. Her voice was clear and carried easily through the chamber's acoustics. She did not shout. She did not need to. My name is Diane Chen. I am the appointed ambassador of the United Nations of Earth, representing the 8 billion human beings who call our world home. I am here because you have questions about us. Specifically, about our pain tolerance, about what our bodies can do, about whether that makes us dangerous. She paused. Let the words settle. I am not going to stand here and tell you that we are not dangerous. That would be dishonest. Humans are capable of extraordinary violence. Our history is full of wars, atrocities, cruelties that I will not describe because they would take too long and they would not help you understand who we are today. We have hurt each other in ways that would horrify every being in this room. We have, at various points in our history, been exactly what some of you fear, a species that uses its resilience for destruction. The chamber was absolutely still. Gorok, in his massive chair, was watching Chen with an intensity that could have melted glass. But that is not the whole story. And if I only told you about our capacity for violence, I would be lying to you by omission. Because the same resilience that makes us capable of enduring pain also makes us capable of enduring everything else. Grief, loss, failure, heartbreak, the long, slow, grinding work of building something better out of the wreckage of something terrible. She touched the podium lightly, a small, grounding gesture. They are high. Unnervingly high, I understand. But I want you to think about what those numbers actually mean. They mean that when a human gets knocked down, they get back up. Not because they don't feel the blow, because they do. They feel every single blow. And they get up anyway. Your scientists tested our bodies. They measured our nerve responses, our cortisol levels, our neural activity. They produced excellent data. The data is not understanding. So let me give you some understanding. On Earth, there is a tradition. When a human child falls down and scrapes their knee, they cry. Because it hurts, and their parent picks them up, holds them, and says the same words that parents have been saying for as long as our species has existed. They say, I know it hurts, but you're going to be okay. And then they put the child down, and the child keeps walking. That is who we are. That is what the number 83 means. It means we fall, and we hurt, and someone holds us, and we keep going. Representative Gorok. She turned to face the Gorvathi directly. He stiffened. You have asked how the Union would fight us if we turned hostile. It is a fair question. I will give you a fair answer. You probably could not. Not because we are invincible. We are very far from invincible. We die of diseases. We die of old age at barely 80 years. We die of sadness. Yes, sadness can kill us. It is a medical fact. We are fragile in ways that would astonish you. But if you fought us, we would not stop. We would not surrender. Not because we are stubborn, though we are, but because we have spent our entire evolutionary history learning one lesson above all others, that giving up hurts more than anything the universe can throw at us. The chamber was so quiet that Fren, watching from outpost 7714, could hear the hum of the station's ventilation system more clearly than the ambient sound from the council feed. But that is the wrong question, Chen continued. The question is not how you would fight us. The question is why you would need to. And the answer, I hope, is that you would never need to. Because we did not cross the stars looking for enemies. We crossed the stars looking for friends. She reached into the pocket of her jacket and produced something small. She held it up so the nearest representatives could see. It was a photograph, a real physical photograph, printed on paper, creased and worn from handling. It showed a group of humans standing in front of a spacecraft. They were smiling. Some were waving. One was holding a hand-lettered sign that read, in English and in the 3 most common Union trade languages, Hello from Earth. This photograph was taken on the day our first delegation left Earth for Union space. Chen said, these are the people who volunteered to be the first humans to represent our species to the galaxy. They were teachers, scientists, engineers, artists. They left their families, their homes, everything they knew, to travel to a place they had never been, to meet beings they had never imagined. They did this knowing that they might not be welcomed, knowing that they might be feared, knowing that they might be rejected. They came anyway, because that is what humans do. We go toward the unknown. We reach out to the unfamiliar. We extend our hands even when we are afraid that our hands might be slapped away. We've been doing this for our entire history, crossing oceans, climbing mountains, leaving the planet that made us. We are a species that walks toward the thing that scares us, not because we do not feel the fear, because we feel it and we go anyway. Chen lowered the photograph. You measured our pain tolerance. I understand why. You needed data. You needed to know what we could handle. But I want to suggest that you measured the wrong thing. Pain tolerance tells you what a body can survive. It does not tell you what a heart can build. If you admit us to the Union, we will not be your most powerful members. We will not be your strongest fighters, or your fastest runners, or your longest-lived species. We will die young by your standards. We will get sick. We will make mistakes. We will embarrass ourselves and apologize and make the same mistakes again. We are deeply, profoundly imperfect. But we will show up every time. For every crisis, every disaster, every moment when someone needs help and no one else is willing to go, we will show up. Because that is what our pain tolerance actually means. It does not mean we are tough. It means we do not quit. She stood in silence for a moment, letting the words breathe. Then she said, I asked the council to vote on our membership. Whatever you decide, we will accept. And whatever you decide, we will be here. Because that is also what we do. We endure. Diane Chen stepped back from the podium. She did not bow. She did not smile. She simply stood, her hands at her sides, and waited. The silence in the grand chamber lasted for 31 seconds. Vren counted every one. Then, from the back of the chamber, someone began to strike their hands together. It was a Dren delegate, a junior representative from one of the outer colonies, who had learned the human gesture of applause from a documentary about Earth. The sound was awkward and unpracticed, the Dren's heavy hands making a flat, meaty sound that bore little resemblance to the sharp crack of human palms. But it was unmistakable. Others joined. Not all of them, not even most. But enough. Delkari tapping their 4 hands together in a soft, rapid patter. Hathori humming a low, resonant note that was their species' equivalent of approval. Even a few Selvi, their amphibian palms producing a wet, slapping sound that might have been funny in any other context but was, in this moment, oddly moving. Gorik did not applaud. He sat in his chair, his massive arms crossed over his scarred chest, his dark eyes fixed on the small human woman at the podium. His expression was unreadable. His tusks gleamed. The scars on his face, trophies of 100 battles, caught the starlight from the dome above and turned his features into a map of violence and survival. Then he did something that no one in the chamber expected. He stood, all 8 feet of him, rising from his chair with the slow deliberation of a mountain deciding to move. The chamber fell quiet. Every eye turned to the Gorvathi representative, the most vocal opponent of human membership, the being who had called them dangerous, who had demanded their data be released, who had spoken of them as threats to be contained. Gorik looked down at Diane Chen. She looked up at him. The size difference was absurd. He could have picked her up with one hand. She met his gaze without flinching. Human, Gorik said. His voice was a low rumble, barely above a whisper, but in the silence of the chamber it carried to every ear. I have fought in 11 wars. I have killed enemies with my bare hands. I have endured wounds that should have ended me, and I survived because the Gorvathi do not accept death easily. He paused. Your species scored 83 on the pain index. Without augmentation, without training. Your baseline. Yes, Chin said. My species' record is 70, set by our greatest warrior after years of cybernetic enhancement. I am aware. Gorik was quiet for a moment. Then, slowly, he reached up and touched the largest scar on his face, a jagged line that ran from his left eye to the corner of his jaw. This scar was given to me by a Krau blade at the siege of Then. The wound nearly killed me. The pain was the worst thing I have ever experienced. It took me 3 months to recover. He dropped his hand. Your mother, the one who scored 87, she endured worse than this 4 times to bring children into the world.
Yes, Chen said simply.
Gorak stared at her. Something moved behind his eyes. Something deep and tectonic, like the shifting of plates beneath a planet's surface. It was not fear. It was not anger. It was recognition. The recognition of one survivor looking at another and seeing for the first time not a rival or a threat, but a reflection. I withdraw my objection, Gorak said. The chamber erupted. Delegates shouted, whispered, turned to each other in shock. The Gorvathi representative, the loudest voice against human membership, had reversed his position. Not grudgingly, not conditionally, completely. Furthermore, Gorak continued, his voice cutting through the noise like a blade, I move that the membership vote be held immediately. The humans have waited long enough. They have answered every question. They have endured every test. If this council cannot recognize courage when it stands before us, then we do not deserve to call ourselves a union. It was not close. 44-3. The human species was admitted to the Galactic Union by the widest margin in the institution's 200-year history. Diane Chen received the news at the podium. She listened to the vote count, nodded once, and said, Thank you. On behalf of the people of Earth, we are honored. Then she walked out of the chamber, found a quiet corridor, leaned against the wall and cried. Not from pain, not from sadness, from the sheer, overwhelming weight of a moment that mattered more than any number on any scale could ever measure. Thessa found her there 5 minutes later. The Velkari analyst stood at a respectful distance and waited. When Chen wiped her eyes and looked up, Thessa said, Ambassador, you are crying. Yes, Chen said. Humans do that sometimes. Are you in pain? Chen laughed, a wet, broken, beautiful laugh. No, I'm in relief, which is almost the same thing. Thessa considered this. I do not understand human emotions. Neither do we most of the time. They stood in the corridor together for a moment. The tall, grey, four-armed Velkari and the small, tear-streaked human, and Thessa said, Your speech was effective, but I do not think it was the speech that changed the vote. I think it was the mother. The score of 87. When Gorak spoke about her, his voice changed. He was not afraid anymore. He was impressed. And for a Gorvathi warrior, there is no higher form of respect than being impressed by an opponent. Chen smiled. Sarah Nichols, part-time librarian, mother of 4. She's going to be very surprised when I tell her she changed galactic history. On Outpost 7714, Vren watched the vote results flash across her screen. 44-3. She sat back in her chair, closed all 4 of her eyes, and let out a breath she felt like she had been holding for weeks. Pell appeared at her door. Doctor, have you seen? I have seen. He came in and sat down. They were quiet together for a while. 2 Velkari scientists in a small office on the edge of known space, processing the fact that the galaxy had just changed. What happens now? Pell asked. Now? Vren opened her eyes. Now the humans are part of the Union. They will serve on councils and committees. They will contribute to research and exploration. They will send their children to Union schools and their soldiers to Union peacekeeping forces. They will argue about policy and complain about regulations and make friends with everyone they meet.
She paused. And they will teach us things we did not know we needed to learn.
Like what?
Vren thought about Marcus Cole, whistling through stage 5.
About Emily Zhao, crying and enduring. About James Okonkwo, finding joy in a kitchen. About David, turning agony into poetry. About Sarah Nichols, carrying photographs of her children across the stars. Like how to keep going, she said. Like how to fall down and get back up. Like how to feel everything. All the pain, all the joy, all the fear, all the love, and not let any of it stop you. Pell was quiet for a long time. Then he said, They really are remarkable. They really are. There was a knock at the door. Marcus Cole leaned in, grinning. Hey, Doc. Slim. You guys hear the news? We heard, Vren said. Pretty cool, right? So listen, I'm putting together a party in the rec room. Okonkwo's cooking. David's going to read some poetry, which, I'll be honest, I don't totally get, but it's nice. Even Big Guy said he'd come. He paused. You two in. Vren looked at Pell. Pell looked at Vren. The weight of the moment. The data, the votes, the fear, the hope hung between them like starlight.
We're in!
Vren said. Marcus beamed. Outstanding. And Doc? Bring your appetite, Okonkwo says. He's making enough food for 100 people. There are only 60 beings on this station. Marcus winked. Yeah, but 40 of them are going to want seconds. He disappeared down the corridor, his voice echoing back to them as he went, knocking on doors, spreading the word, pulling the station together the way humans always did, not with force or authority, but with warmth and noise and the simple, irresistible gravity of a species that treated everyone they met like a friend they hadn't made yet. Vren stood, straightened her coat, and followed the sound of his voice. The galaxy had measured human pain tolerance and found it beyond comprehension, but the galaxy had missed the point entirely. It was never about the pain. It was about what came after the pain. The getting up, the reaching out, the refusing to let suffering be the end of the story. Somewhere in the cafeteria, James Okonkwo was singing while he cooked. Somewhere in the rec room, Throk the Gorvathi guard was practicing his poker face. Somewhere on Varathi Prime, Diane Chen was drinking coffee and calling her family to tell them the news. And somewhere on Earth, a part-time librarian named Sarah Nichols was putting her children to bed, unaware that her ability to endure had just opened a door between the stars. The humans had arrived. Not as conquerors, not as monsters, not as the terrifying pain-immune warriors that the galaxy had feared. They arrived as themselves. Messy, loud, stubborn,